Great. So I think we're going to get started in a second. So I think we're going to get started in a second. I'm just going to take care of some housekeeping. Farah from my office is on the Zoom with us. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and she'll be keeping track of them. So at the end, we can get to them. If there's a question that comes up while we're doing the presentation and we might want to sidetrack, but generally we hold questions till the end and then try to answer everybody's questions specifically. If you want to speak to any of us after this, we're happy to talk to you for free, no strings attached. This isn't a sales pitch. We're just here to give you free information, trying to help you, guide you through this process, and we're here as to be a resource. So we're happy to talk to any of you after this call, after this presentation on a call to talk about your specific situation if you need help or guidance. And again, this class and workshop is for anybody interested in buying. You don't need to be ready to buy today. Be ready to buy, preparing yourself to buy in a year or 2 years or 5 years. But this class is an overall presentation of the process and the experience that we provide, and hopes gives you an overview so that you can better prepare for the buying experience. So hello, I'm also Victoria Alexander. I'm the owner of Realty Collective, a boutique real estate firm that's been in Brooklyn for over 16 years that I started. And we are try to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers by helping people make lifelong decisions that are goal-oriented. And I focus as little as I can about making money and more about on helping people reach their goals. And I've been working with Rashida and Lisa now for a pretty long time. Rashida was my lawyer when I bought my house 12, almost going on 12 years ago now at this point. And I've been working with Lisa for a while, helping first-time home buyers, and she's just been super hands-on, and really just three of us as a team, an all-women team, have been amazing to work with. So I can't speak highly enough of how great that experience that has been. There's a chat there at the bottom, like I said, for your questions. Other housekeeping items. There are going to be links to relevant information and resources that we provide. Well, after this class, we'll be providing a homebuyer handbook that I've created to help you as well. And that will come in an email form. So look for emails from us afterwards if you want our homebuyer handbook. You'll also be emailed a recording of this presentation. So if you don't get to stay on for the whole time or you want to rewatch anything, it'll be sent to you. And again, you can contact us, any of us privately after this presentation. And I think that's it for the housekeeping stuff. Again, I'm Victoria Alexander, owner of Realty Collective. One of the things that I offer people, so and just, I usually say this later, but then I think it's lost in the presentation, is that my services are free to buyers. They get paid by the seller. So don't feel like, oh, I can't afford a broker. You need representation when you're negotiating for a deal. I act as a therapist, a coach, your guide through this emotional roller coaster from buying a house, property here in New York City. So I think that's it on the intro stuff. Oh, one of the ways I help guide people is setting them up in Basecamp, which is a project management tool. I have a library of resources that guide you every step of the way. So when it's time for appraisal, I have resources on that. When it's time for inspection, I have resources on that. So every step of the experience, that there's information for you to educate yourself so you feel like you're in control of your own situation. And I think we're just going to go to the first slide. And look, there's me, Lisa, and Rashida. And I think before we get started, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Lisa, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. I am a loan officer at Cross Country Mortgage. My focus is New York City, and pretty much a huge chunk of my business is New York City, condos, co-ops, single family, multifamily. I also do loans all across the country, from Connecticut, New Jersey, California, you name it, I can do it. As Victoria mentioned, I really love working with first-time home buyers, and I'm really excited to answer your questions and see how we can help you get into a home.
Great, Rashida.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Rashida Sadiq. I am a real estate attorney. Been practicing for going on 19 years. I'm licensed in both New York and New Jersey, so I represent clients, whether you're buying, selling, within the tri-state area. well, the New York and New Jersey. Particularly first-time buyers, I try to make sure that you understand the role of your attorney and getting you to that closing and making sure that you understand the process as well. I look forward to sharing my information on the process and any questions you may have in regarding buying in New York and New Jersey, if you have any questions as far as that as well.
Great. So let's go to the first slide. So why buy now? Well, first thing is the rent and buying prices have never been closer, with historic interest rates at around 3% still, right, Lisa?
Sorry. Yep.
Yep. So, I mean, so that I have clients right now, they're paying $6,500 for rent, which is a lot. I mean, I know that a lot of people probably are not in that bracket, but then they're realizing that they can spend the same amount and buy something and get a comparable apartment to what they're renting right now. So it's a great time because it's never been cheaper to borrow money. You're not wasting money on rent. When you spend money on rent, you never see that money again. Yes, you get to write part of it off if you work from home, but really you're building equity when you purchase a piece of property. You get to see that money back that you've invested in yourself when you sell the property. You get to design the space for your specific needs and wants. You know, it's a long-term investment in yourself and rather than the rental market. And we provide a link to a rent versus buy matrix that's provided by the New York Times that helps you calculate a very specific scenario of how long you're going to stay in New York. Rule of thumb is you want to be able to hold this property for at least 5 years to break even, but longer than that to see your property appreciate so that you can see a return on your investment. But we'll be sharing this link shortly. And then assemble your team, which you met. Sorry, God, I'm not good at the presentation, doing the presentation and speaking at the same time, obviously. You need to assemble your team. And the 3 people you really need are a real estate broker, a buyer's broker who represents you. Every time you walk into a property, that broker represents the seller, and they're looking out for the best intentions, and their fiduciary responsibility is to the seller. It is not to you. So you need representation. If you've never done this before, you need it even more. Then you need a New York City real estate attorney. You do not need your uncle that is a lawyer. You do not need your lawyer that you used out in California. You need a New York City real estate attorney that's familiar with co-ops and condos and the very complicated new construction rules around our specific area. Then you also need a mortgage professional. And I would say, you know, walking into your bank, not the way to go. I was like, oh, well, you know, unless you have a lot of money and then you can get private lending through your bank because you have a large amount of assets with them, they're not going to be as competitive as going to a mortgage professional that's going to have options for tons of different mortgage products for you. So those are the 3 people you really need. Then you might need a contractor, an architect. You need an inspector if you're buying something that needs to be inspected. And who else you might need on here? Oh, and you need some lead time. That's not a person, but that's something you definitely need if you're going to be buying. If your lease is up in 30 days, you know, you might be cutting it pretty close. Anything to add there, ladies?
Sounds great.
Yep, I think you got all of the individual.
I got it. Okay, good. Making sure. I'm making sure. Financing. Lisa, take it away.
So yes, so the first thing you want to do, if you're thinking you want to buy a house, the first thing you want to do is you want to get pre-approved. Well, first of all, in the sort of post-COVID world, most places require a pre-approval even to take a look at the property. But also it's really important for you because you want to know how much you can borrow from the bank. You don't want to look at places that are out of your price range in terms of the kind of loan you can get. You also don't want to cut yourself short from what you might be able to get pre-approved for, just so you know what that number is. So you're going to call someone like me. I'm a mortgage professional. I work for Cross Country Mortgage. We work like all of the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. So as Victoria sort of said, what's sort of cool about that is we have a whole bunch of different products. So when I talk to you, it's actually a pretty personal conversation because I'm trying to figure out what kind of property you're looking for. What is this, a starter home? Do you think you're going to be in here forever? Do you think you might rent it down the line and move someplace else? All of this will help to sort of find the best product for you. I'm also going to get some information about you, about your personal finances. How much do you make? What's your debt like? Where's the down payment coming from? All of this is really important to find the best product for you and to get you pre-approved. And as Victoria mentioned, rates are still ridiculously low. Honestly, this time last year, I did not think I would still be saying that, but rates are still in the high 2s to low 3s, which is amazing. And then I'm going to get you a pre-approval, and that pre-approval is really a working draft. So as you start to see things, we will, fine tune that pre-approval, and then you'll submit it when you put an offer in on a house. In terms of a little bit about the products, a mortgage is different if you're applying for your primary or if you're applying for an investment property. So that's always really good to talk to your mortgage professional about. There are things like the standard 20% down 30-year, which for many people is 100% the perfect mortgage for them, particularly right now with rates so low. You can also do 10% down, 5% down. FHA requires 3.5% down. So those are options as well. So really it's just about figuring out what your goals are, what you think you might be looking for, and then educating you on what the possibilities are. And then again, once you have that pre-approval, you will start shopping and looking around at properties with Victoria, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you. Let's see if I can do this correctly. So where do you search? So a lot of people search on Zillow, StreetEasy, Trulia, Realtor.com. The internet has really changed access to listings. There's no more really of those off-market listings that only certain people know about. So as a buyer, that puts you in a really great advantage point that you can look and see everything, but you cannot look one place and see everything, which is the problem with New York City. Because of REBNY, we're not part of the National Realtor Association. There are challenges, and that's why working with a broker helps you get access to the MLS. So when I work with you, I set up a search for you on the back-end database, and you then get listings based on what I have access to. It's StreetEasy still very consumer forward. And so I would say of all the platforms, that's the best one from the consumer side. So I would encourage people to still be working there. And then let's see. Then besides on the internet, where are you searching for the actual apartment or house that you're looking for? And a lot of this has to do with sort of the amenities you're looking for, train access, pre-war, post-war building. Do you want a doorman? Do you want new construction? Do you want a washer, dryer, and dishwasher? Do you want to be close to a park? There's not a lot of new construction in Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens. A lot of new construction in Williamsburg, Gowanus, Sunset Park, anywhere that hasn't had landmarks or historic neighborhoods or there's brownstones. That's where you're more likely to get new construction and amenities like washer, dryer, dishwasher. A lot of apartments in Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens don't come with those amenities. Harder to find 3 bedrooms unless you're in a neighborhood that has new construction options. So that will all really dictate what neighborhood you want. If you want a doorman, you're mostly looking in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn Heights. I know there's virtual doormen now through like Ring and something called Oscar. So if you're okay with not having a physical person there, some buildings have done those upgrades, and that will keep your maintenance down if you don't have to pay someone a salary to sit at your front door. We went over financing. Where do you search? What you're looking for. Remember that co-ops have 1 to 3% closing costs, an average of $4,000, and 3 to 5% for condos. Sellers also have closing costs usually around 8%. So keep that in mind. That's when I tell people about the break-even horizon. You need to cover your closing costs on both ends before you buy and sell the same piece of property. So making an offer and negotiating the terms. What are some of the terms, Rashida, that should go into an offer so that, you don't have to negotiate those things further down the line?
Definitely, some of the more important terms are mortgage contingency. If you are applying for a mortgage, you definitely want to let them know that. So when you're negotiating, that is included there. Part of the mortgage contingency is typically an appraisal clause in there. Lately, sometimes we've been seeing that they take out that appraisal clause. So that's something that you definitely want to speak with your realtor, or when you're negotiating, find out and make sure that there is an appraisal contingency as part of your mortgage contingency as well. Secondly, is regarding part of the you don't really have to put that in the offer, but if you're looking at a co-op and a condo, we do our attorney due diligence prior to you signing. So you want to make sure that you do have the time period. I know sometimes they're like, you have to get contracts signed within 5 business days or, immediately. But if you're buying a co-op and a condo, you want to make sure that you have the turnaround time in order to have your attorney do the due diligence. Inspections are done prior to you signing the contract. So that is definitely something you want to make sure that they know that you're going to be doing an inspection, but understand that it's not a contingency in the contract. It's something that you do prior to signing. Once you do your inspection, then next step is going over the contract and signing the contract or updating any of the terms of your original offer if something changed during your inspection or if there's repairs or things that need to happen. But mainly your main contingency is your mortgage contingency. Also, timeframes. You mentioned lead time. Obviously, closing dates are important. So if you are buying and you need to move within like 60 days, that's something that needs to have a discussion. If the seller is looking at a closing of 90 days or more because they're looking for another property, or if you're looking at a co-op and you need to move in 30 days, but understand that a co-op may take 90 days to get closed. So those are things that you want to make sure that you speak with your realtor, and obviously definitely when you're discussing it with your attorney and going over the contract with your attorney, making sure that you understand those provisions regarding timeframes for closing, mortgage timeframes, and things like that. You mentioned closing costs. That's something also that sometimes can be negotiated regarding the seller. Sometimes there's seller's concessions that are where the seller gives you a credit towards your closing costs. If you're looking at new construction, whether the seller is paying the transfer taxes, sponsor attorney fee, any other kind of credits that they're able to give you towards your closing costs. If you're looking at a house, it's not new construction, then even if you need to sometimes finance your closing costs, there's a thing called a seller's concession that you want to discuss with both your realtor and with your mortgage person and your attorney. Actually, those are very important, something if you're looking at seller's concessions, because there's limits on how much you can get, and you want to make sure that you're even able to get that when your lender is aware of that as well.
Yeah, I think that people just, again, the two things that are always standard is it's contingent on financing. So God forbid you lose your job, the bank looks more closely at your paperwork and says, you know what, we're not going to give you a loan. You have an out, and people don't always think about that concession and making sure that they're going to be able to close, and then making it. I always recommend to people doing an inspection, even if you don't want to make your offer contingent on inspection, because that is a leverage point when you're in a seller's market. And the market's been a little bit weird, right? We've gone back and forth between a buyer's and seller's market. Lisa, Rashid, and I have been very, very busy the last couple of months, but things have shifted. It was really busy because we were in a very strong buyer's market up until December, January. Then we slammed into a seller's market for a little while. And then now I think that things have eased up and it's evened out a little bit. I mean, do Lisa and Rashid, you feel the same, or?
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen this kind of like leveling off where the kind of the madness has kind of eased, where it was just like overbidding, contingencies out there, and then all of a sudden it kind of shifted again. So it's been in the last year or so back and forth. But I think in the last, I'm knocking on wood, but in the last maybe month or so, I'm starting to kind of see a leveling of kind of regular.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. The other thing I would just add in terms of the appraisal contingency that Rashida mentioned, I'm definitely seeing that a little bit more in like Westchester and Connecticut than in the city per se. But where situations where bidding wars are going much higher than things are selling for right now because of whatever reason. And one thing that is possible that you could think about if you want to do an appraisal contingency is mortgage insurance is really cheap right now. So it's not like all or nothing. So like, just so you guys understand, like an appraisal contingency is like if you're buying a place for $599, that the property is going to be appraised by the bank at $599 for it to work, right? So what some people are doing are just waiving that altogether and saying, I'll take it no matter what the property appraises at. What other people are doing that I think is sort of the smarter move is saying like, okay, if it's at $599, if it appraises like at $525, I'll still take it, no problem. And then basically what you do is for that difference in that appraised value, you would add mortgage insurance. So that's something that if you're concerned about appraisals, and again, Victoria and I have a deal right now that is happening in Brooklyn. The appraisal is going to come in 2 days. I'm not concerned about it. So that's just a conversation you should have with your lender in terms of what options are available if you think that might be an issue.
Thanks for reminding me to send some comps to the appraisal for that deal, because that's on my list of things to do, and make sure I get that in ahead of time. Rashida's on that deal too, all three of us, and it's been wild, trying to navigate the seller's demands to make sure that everything works for a buyer. Lisa, did you explain what mortgage insurance, PMI mortgage insurance is?
Sure.
Actually?
Yeah, so mortgage insurance or PMI, private mortgage insurance. Basically, it just means if you're putting less than 20% down on a property, then you have what's called mortgage insurance. If you go FHA, that's built into the loan, and that mortgage insurance is always there. If you go non-FHA, so more of a conforming loan with PMI or private mortgage insurance, it's something to think about because it's depending on the loan amount, it's really affordable right now, again, because rates are so low. And it automatically comes off when you're at 78 to 80% equity in the property. So it is definitely an option, and something to think about if, again, you want to buy, but you maybe don't have that full 20%.
I had to do PMI because I put down only 10% when I purchased my house, and luckily got it off after the value went up to the 20%, which was so great. I'm still paying much higher interest rate at 4.25% rather than the 3 that's now, but refinancing would be such a heavy lift for me. I just can't make it happen. So just when I got my mortgage, it was 5.25%. I think people really like to think about what the market was like 11 years ago. It's just so radically different. I had to have my parents co-sign my loan since, I own my own business. My paper trail is not as amazing as I would like it to be. But that also, if anybody here works for themselves, one of the great things to do before you file your taxes is to talk to Lisa. She'll really go over how to classify things so you look great to a bank. So if you are running your own business, congratulations, and on your success and for being an entrepreneur in this crazy world, but really talking to Lisa to figure out what is going to look good on paper in front of a bank. It's important to review with her, and that's something that she will do for free for you. And then other things that I want to tell people before, when we're making the offer, you really want to be prepared with having we have a submit offer form that we have you fill out ahead of time, have you write a cover letter ahead of time, and you get that pre-approval. So those are the 3 documents I submit, as well as a cover letter or intro from me to the other broker that's representing the seller to paint you in the best light. And having those things ready to go is super important. I really think that there's a mental, an emotional process for sellers for the first offer. It really means a lot, and they take it very seriously. And, if they make a commitment to you quickly, they'll usually follow through on that. So I think that being prepared and ready once you see the property that you fall in love with is super important to leverage your position and get you that property that you fall in love with. So that's one thing about negotiating and making your offer. The contingencies with and then having, I have a list of inspectors, calling them and making sure they're ready to go and getting them lined up to get in there as quickly as possible, because Rashida and other lawyers aren't going to start doing their due diligence until we've cleared the inspection process and that we've given the go ahead that there aren't any major issues and that we want to move forward with the deal. If you do the inspection and the roof's falling in, you don't want to buy the house anymore. There's no reason for her to do all that work if there's not going to be a deal. So that's why we try to get the inspection done ASAP, so that they can move forward with doing their due diligence and we can get into contract quickly. What happens at the inspection? They go through all the mechanicals. If it's a co-op or condo, they look at the building mechanicals, tell you when things are going to fail or how long they have what their life longevity is. Some boilers, 5 years, 10, 15 years, HVAC, just being prepared to know that that's an expense that will either be on you or on the building, and how you'll approach those expenses and costs. After your offer is accepted, we sent out something called a deal sheet that goes to the lawyer, so they know all the terms of the deal, who the buyer and seller is, how much money you're putting down on your mortgage, how many days you have to close. The deal that we have this extenuating circumstance with the appraisal contingency, they also wanted to close in 45 days, where we're just like, that's not possible. Usually closings are 60 days. That gives the bank enough time to do their due diligence, and the lawyers got to get the title insurance and, I think get the co-op certificate. Just takes time to do these things. And so having an expectation that we can do it a lot faster, especially it's just taken a lot long in general post-COVID, if we're in post-COVID town. But so making sure that the timeline is realistic is another point to make sure that's on the deal sheet. What else should be on the deal sheet, Rashida?
For if you're looking at co-ops and condos, the more information we have regarding the shares, the management company information, any assessments, things like that, we want to definitely know. One of the things that has been coming up lately, not on any of your deals, but sometimes the realtors don't include assessments, or maybe they didn't know or they just forgot. But then when I do my due diligence and the buyers finds out, oh, there's an addition to the common charges or maintenance, there's a $300 assessment, which is an additional payment that you're paying to the building for a certain amount of time that they didn't factor in. So that becomes an issue. So always important to try to get as much information as possible from the other side, so that the buyer, what's, any costs or anything that you are aware of that you need to know about.
Yeah, those assessments, if the management didn't, some of the management companies are just slow to give us so much information. At that deal I have at 34 Plaza Street, if anybody wants amazing views, the management has just been like trickling down. Like, we asked a whole bunch of questions when we went to list the property. It took them forever to get back to us. And then, there was another round, and just takes so much time to pull the information. And they're just like, go to the website and pay for all of our, our offering plan. They just want you to go to the website and pay for everything. And I'm like, it's not on me. So, we try to be as transparent and upfront as possible about all the information, but sometimes it's hidden in there. And I know that same deal, I think that he left the assessment off the deal sheet, or they were surprised by it anyway. But then we found it in the marketing, and they were like, okay, I guess he wasn't trying to pull a fast one. So then once you go into contract, what happens then?
So contract. So I said, as an attorney, we kind of come in at the end of you found your property, you've done your inspection. Now it's time for you to sign the contract. Between finding the property and going into contract, it can be within about a week. So it's really kind of stressful, or, sometimes longer than that if you're buying a co-op or a condo, because we have to do our due diligence. The contract is really, we have our boilerplate contract, which has basically the terms from the deal sheet. Then we have what we call riders to the contract, which are additional provisions that hopefully protect you as the buyer. Time frames, mortgage commitment, time periods to be extended, any of the things that are repairs or anything that has to be done. As is clause. So one thing that always comes up, what is as is? As is means that you're buying the property from when you saw it. So if something wasn't working when you did your inspection, it doesn't have to be working at closing unless they specifically said they're going to fix that. If a window was broken when you saw and you did your inspection, they don't have to fix that unless you tell them, I want the window fixed, and they agree to it, or they give you a credit. So as is just means when you saw the property, that's the condition that you're purchasing it. So that's also something that you want to understand in the contract of sale. Closing time periods, as I mentioned, New York is on or about closing date. So that's something you have to kind of understand when you're trying to schedule, when am I going to close? When am I going to move out? When do I have to schedule closings? There's a lot that goes into getting to that closing date. So I 100% never schedule a move out or anything until you speak to your attorney and speak to your loan officer to make sure that you are cleared and that the closing date has been confirmed. Because especially in New York, especially if you're looking at co-ops, there's so many moving parties that have to coordinate a closing. And even if your contract says July 31st is your closing date, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the actual date you're going to close. It's an on or about date, which means that you have to get clear to close by the bank. And then also after that, everyone has to be available on that date and on that time. So it may not happen on that date or on that time because of scheduling conflicts. So definitely something that you want to have a conversation and understand as part of your contract of sale. Closing, once you close, when you're about to close, your attorney will notify you about your closing date. Important that you do a walkthrough prior to closing. Your contract does provide that you have to do your walkthrough at least 24 to 48 hours prior to closing. And the reason we do that is so that if there's an issue that comes up, there's enough time for the realtors, for the attorney to get an idea of what it costs to fix it or to have it fixed prior to you actually getting to the closing table, because you don't want to have an adjournment or you don't want to take a credit for something that you didn't know, it's not, and it costs you more than that to fix. What else? Contract of sale. I think I covered most of what's in the contract of sale regarding your final walkthrough, closing date. Oh, title. So if you're looking at a house or you're looking at a condo, there's a thing that we do what's called title search. So the purpose of that is to make sure that you don't have any there's no judgments, liens, violations, all of those things on the property. I also tell my buyers, if you have cars, if you rent cars and things like that, parking tickets come up. I had a closing the other day. So when I got the title report, my clients had a very, unique name. And I went through their addresses and it turns out the husband had some parking tickets. So I had to immediately tell him, go online, pay these judgments off and provide us with proof, because we have to notify the title company and even a co-op. The co-op does a lien search and the management company or the co-op attorney wants to make sure there's no judgments against you. So always double check those past parking tickets, from 5 years, 6 years ago that now become judgments. They come up when when you're purchasing the property.
Ruth, and I think, Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about underwriting and what happens after the contract is signed? What happens with the bank there?
Sure. So now Rashida has done all of her work. She's drafted this awesome contract for you. You've signed it. The seller signed it. It's now a fully executed contract. This is happening. So the very first thing you want to do, and your attorney will do, will be to email that fully executed contract to me, to the mortgage person, because basically now is when I submit a loan application to processing and underwriting. We really get everything started. We have had everything ready in the meantime so that we're not sitting on our hands. Everything's ready to go. So as soon as we have that fully executed contract, I make this a live deal. I order the appraisal, which is actually one of the longest parts of the process for us because we move really, really quickly. So the appraisal is really the thing that needs to get ordered as soon as possible. So we order the appraisal and we start to get your file ready for underwriting, which basically means that you'll have some initial disclosures to sign, to e-sign. And then my processor, Danielle, who's awesome, basically works through the file and makes sure that we have everything the underwriter is going to want. As soon, that's like if there's any updated bank statements we need, if there is a big transfer on your bank statement, we need to source that. This is, once you are in fully executed contract, this is not a time to open a new credit card, to transfer a lot of money around, unless you've talked about, to buy a boat, which I actually had a client once do, to get a new car, which I've had clients do multiple times. These can kill your deal, okay? You do not want to add any new liabilities to your loan application because that's the information we've used to qualify you, right? So basically, as soon as the appraisal comes back, we submit you to underwriting. One of the things that I think makes me and my team and my bank stand out is our underwriting turn times are ridiculously fast. So we get an answer back from underwriters within a few days. Big banks can take weeks. Particularly if you're buying a co-op, this is really, really important, because you are not going to get to complete your co-op application and get your co-op interview until you are through underwriting and have what is called a mortgage commitment letter. The mortgage commitment letter means that the underwriter has reviewed your file and says, this looks awesome. Once you have that, then we're halfway through the process, which is great. So basically, if it's a co-op, then Victoria is going to take that mortgage commitment letter, take all the other documents that you've already got ready, and get it over to the co-op board so that they can schedule your interview. Some co-ops say, come in tomorrow. Other co-ops say it's going to be a month and a half. I have 4 co-ops right now that I could close them in a week, except we're waiting for co-op interviews. So this is just something, again, to understand, and again, to make sure that you're working with a lawyer, with a realtor, and with a mortgage person who really understand co-ops, because we all know that that's the case. And so we make sure to plan accordingly. And then after, when you get your mortgage commitment, you'll have a few conditions that the underwriter asks for, maybe a letter of explanation to explain something, or to get insurance, because you have to pay for your year of insurance prior to closing on a purchase or at closing. And then we schedule then once we have those last few things, we do a clear to close. And that's really awesome, because clear to close means, like Rashida said, everybody can now schedule the closing. Again, if that's co-op, it might be another 3 weeks till you close, depending on people's schedule. But that means that basically the bank has said, this looks great, everything's ready to go, schedule the closing. And then you're ready to get to the closing table.
That's all it takes. Make it sound so easy.
I feel like we made it sound way more complex than it really is, because we went into a lot of detail. But I think that
details help prepare people.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, what you guys hopefully don't get too scared by all this, is that, like, we got your back, and we're gonna make sure you get things done when you need to get things done, so that you get to the closing table as quickly and painlessly as possible.
Yeah, our job is to, sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
That's our job, is to do the behind the scenes, so you don't see. We're giving you a little glimpse of what that behind the scenes is, so you can kind of understand the process. But seamlessly, we try to make sure that you don't get all of that, scheduling, or underwriting, or this is what we're waiting on. So we'll keep you updated. This is where you are now. This is what we need from you. But all of the other stuff is with a good lawyer, a good realtor, and a good mortgage person, you'll have less of that anxiety of knowing every single kind of those things that will get you, even more nervous.
Yeah. I say, this is an emotional roller coaster. You need the guidance of experts, not just the emotional support, but also the education that they have, that we have, that we're doing this for a really long time. I highly trust my financial advisor. She has all of my money. She's an expert. I don't want to make investments for my retirement account and mutual funds. I'm very confused and overwhelmed by those decisions. So I'm glad I have an expert to guide me. And that's how I feel, about how I help my clients. I'm an expert in this, and that I'm here to help you avoid pitfalls and give you as much guidance as I possibly can to help you make the decision of this is where you want to live, but also make sure that you're not overpaying, you're not leaving money on the table, that you're not leaving negotiation tactics and strategies off out of the conversation that could really help you. So working with an expert in any field is super important, as people know. That's why we all have jobs. You're good at what you do, and someone's hired you to be, the best in your specific field. So that's what we do. We're experts in real estate, and we're here to help you make this as painless as possible with our expertise and do all the heavy lifting so that you can just be on the emotional roller coaster ride of falling in love with the property in New York City and hopefully winning it. And so Katie raised her hand. We're about to be done also with the presentation part and being open it up for questions. So I think that's all I was going to say when Lisa was talking about, how complicated we make it sound, it is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. And that's why working with me, Rashida, and Lisa together, we have such rapport and work so closely on so many deals that it really benefits the client, because I can call them both 24 hours a day, be like, what's happening with this? My client's freaking out, or like, is this going to be a problem? Because we just have that sort of candor with each other and are accountable to each other for so long and love working with each other. So I'm going to open it. That's the presentation. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and I hope you learned a lot. And now we're going to open it up for questions, and I'm going to go into the chat and see what the questions are. They were from Katie, and if Katie, you want to unmute yourself, you can ask it, or you can put it in the chat, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, happy to voice over it. And first of all, thank you all. This was super helpful. One of the things that I was curious about was just, I was curious to learn, at the outset, you had talked about the trade-offs between renting and buying. One of the things that I'm personally thinking about is I both think there's a lot of financial reasons buying to make sense. I am not confident in 5 years' time I will be in New York, but would be just as open to renting out a place, and would be curious to hear how you advise if there are any other trade-offs that folks should think through when they are considering the, do I just keep renting? Do I buy? Do I buy and eventually maybe rent out? And would just love to hear if there are any other factors that you didn't mention to go into that decision.
Really, I would just think about, okay, so if you're not going to be here, the type of property would be really important. You're not going to want to buy a co-op that has rental restrictions. You're going to want to stick to condos, and condos that don't have, you know, barriers to renting out. So, because some condos make their people that are renting pay fees, go through an application process. So you want to buy a property that is not going to, if you had to make a move to another city, country, whatever, that would be easy for you to say, okay, you know what, I'm not ready to sell. I haven't, my property hasn't appreciated enough for me to sell and break even and or take out the money I've invested. So I want to rent out. And long as you bought in a place that has, you know, a rent, you want to think about what the demand is for renting in your area, if it's going to cover your expenses, and you're not putting yourself in a financial position where you're going to not break even at least, or be getting so much of a loss. Because in some situations, your co-op, your condo maintenance might be too high to cover, and with the mortgage cover it, the rent might not cover it. So you want to be strategic about where you're buying from that perspective. Besides not renting it out, I'm not sure. Guys, any other input on thinking about not being able to stay in New York?
I think just in general, just about thinking about whether you want to buy, and obviously like taking a mortgage. One thing you have to think about is that, you know, the calculations I used are based on your credit report and what debt you have. You know, you need to know if the bottom number of what a mortgage payment would be, or a mortgage payment plus a maintenance fee would be, if you're comfortable with that. You know, and that might mean taking into account debt you have that wouldn't show up on your credit report. Like, you know, I have 2 kids. Childcare is a huge part of where my salary goes. That's not showing up on a credit report. So that's just something to keep in mind, while also realizing that, you know, even if your mortgage payment is more than rent, you're getting, you know, a little bit more bang for your buck, either in the immediate of the space of what you're getting, or in the long term of, again, like Victoria mentioned, having equity. So that's just sort of those are like the numbers you need to think about and make that personal decision. But I think first you need to sort of talk to someone to figure out what the numbers might be.
Awesome,
Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions from anybody that joined the class today? You can raise your hand, or you can put your question in the chat. Okay. I don't think there are other questions, but if you do have a question that you don't want to ask here, like I said, we're going to send you some follow-up material. We're going to send out our home buying handbook, and then some other information. If you want to schedule a call with any of us, our contact information is not only here on the screen, but will be in that follow-up email. And I'll also be sending out a copy of this recording as well, so that you can share with a partner or any friend that's also considering buying. It'll be on YouTube. So if you couldn't listen to the whole thing, you can just listen to it tomorrow in the background while you're doing something else. Okay, great. If there's nothing else, I want to thank everybody for their time and joining today, and please stay in touch.
Thank you. Have a great
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
afternoon. Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.